the fourth in line to the British throne, showing off his signature antics.
The country is shocked by an unexpected press announcement from Buckingham Palace. The world was still reeling from the recent wave of royal health crises when a new announcement surfaced that focused on the youngest and most vulnerable member of the royal family rather than the King or the Princess of Wales. Prince Louis is a lively royal. Not only is the official update shocking, it's terrible. The public's perception of the young prince's destiny has been permanently altered by what Buckingham just disclosed. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates before we delve further into what this actually implies for the royal family. Shockwaves swept the country as the words from Buckingham Palace flashed across all major networks. In a matter of minutes, royal reporters hurried to the palace gates, confirming what few could believe with shaky voices. This wasn't just another official statement or update. The palace acknowledged something quite personal in its customary measured tone. It was about Prince Louis, the youngster who was renowned for his vigor, humor, and charming cheekiness. However, there was suddenly a strange weight to the words. This has nothing to do with titles or obligation. It was about something heartbreakingly real, human, and frail. Even senior staff members had not received a prior briefing, according to inside sources. There were no warnings, no whispers, and no leaks. It was directly from the press office of the palace, a well-crafted remark that appeared to be filled with both power and grief. The public's generosity is much appreciated by the family. It started while they worked through a personal issue involving Prince Louis. However, the tone was different. The palace rarely uses such emotionally charged rhetoric unless something unusual has happened, as those who followed the monarchy for decades were aware. Speculation broke out almost immediately. How could things have gone so badly? Why right now? Some sources suggested that the family's turbulence, from the Princess of Wales' protracted recuperation to the King's health battle, had subtly affected emotional and psychological issues. The announcement was characterized by royal correspondents as one of Buckingham's most candid and humane declarations to date. It had nothing to do with appearance. The truth was at issue. Televisions remained on, and phones rang with messages of concern and incredulity in homes all around Britain. People who didn't often keep up with royal news suddenly felt sympathetic. Now at the center of something heartbreakingly serious was Prince Louis, the young child who previously made the country laugh with his harmless antics on the palace balcony. Representatives from Kensington made silent calls to Lammock teachers. Curters were told to postpone planned family visits. There had been a change within Buckingham's walls, and the kingdom was affected. This declaration signaled the end of the Wales family's silence. It validated what many had feared, that the youngest heart of all had been most deeply affected by the illness, stress, and change of the previous year. However, despite everyone's efforts to interpret the palace's solemn remarks, one question remained unsolved. What had happened to Prince Louis specifically? What transpired as cameras gathered outside the royal gates wasn't merely an explanation. William himself made a sobering admission, one that revealed the inner suffering of the royal family. The entire globe held its breath when Prince William took the microphone. There was no script, no podium, just a father facing the rumors with a faint shudder. He then spoke in a way that destroyed the appearance of royal composure. It had nothing to do with etiquette. It was about a hurting youngster. Prince William was more than simply a potential monarch at that precise time. He was a distraught parent attempting to keep his son safe. With millions of people watching live and the weight of a nation bearing down, William started with a much more potent quiet than he had practiced formality. A lengthy, emotionally charged silence followed by a confession that was more profound than anyone had expected. He claimed that Louis had been having difficulty and that the strain was causing his voice to crack. This was brutal, unvarnished, and humiliating for a royal with a reputation for poise. He described silent anguish within the royal walls and months that blended into one another. Their home was empty due to Catherine's illness, and King Charles's prognosis made matters worse. But the one with the worst burden in the smallest heart was their youngest, their bright little Louis. William was not afraid to tell the truth. He described long, restless nights when Louis would enter their bedroom, his eyes wide and terrified. Abrupt mood swings, mornings that had been playful but turned into sorrowful afternoons, dinners broken by the sound of quiet steps and hardly touched plates. There were also outbursts. There were times when the young prince was unsure of where to express his grief. He was too little to comprehend. He missed more than simply his mother's company. It was the increasing concern that something irreversible had started. William acknowledged that he had missed the early warning indicators. He had been overburdened with both crisis management and royal responsibilities. However, his remarks were rife with guilt. He claimed that I was attempting to simultaneously grasp the throne and my family, but I was blind to what was sliding between my fingers. A single sentence was what devastated the country. William reiterated something Louis had muttered in a quiet time, something that still troubled him. "Will mommy depart like grandpa?" The harsh weight of loss clashed with the purity of childhood in those 8 words. No parent should have to respond to such question. Nevertheless, William was unable to ignore it any longer. He acknowledged that this particular instance compelled him and Catherine to reassess their priorities, routines, and even their quiet. Then, in a stern yet imploring tone, the prince addressed the media directly. He pleaded for the media to exercise the same caution and empathy that they had shown Catherine when she was recovering. William remarked, "He's just a boy. Let him rest in peace." It wasn't a royal order. It was an appeal from a father whose family had already suffered too much in the public eye. There was a strong atmosphere. Even the most seasoned journalists in the room were disarmed by something about his vulnerability. However, the truth had already spread outside the palace walls, despite William's best efforts to protect his youngest, and there were others observing besides the press. Heartbreak played out softly at Adelaide Cottage behind closed doors. Princess Charlotte, who typically acts as her younger brother's composed guardian, was heard crying to her caregiver. She said, "He doesn't understand why she's not getting better." The family was therefore forced to confront the unpleasant truth that Louis was becoming emotionally isolated, and that action was required. Charlotte had taken up the role of Louis's anchor for several weeks. She attempted to protect him from the quiet, the whispered chats, and the anxious glances that adults shared when they believed the kids weren't looking. She was mature beyond her years. However, even the strongest hearts have their limits, and Charlotte's eventually gave way due to untold suffering. The nanny, who was apparently taken by surprise, attempted to console her, but the truth had already been revealed. Through dependable employees, Catherine heard the words, which devastated her. The idea that her daughter was striving to keep her younger brother together while quietly collapsing struck a deeper chord than any sickness could. Louis, meantime, had evolved. He was no longer as excited as he used to be when he ran down the stairs in the morning. His plate remained untouched while breakfast went by in almost complete stillness. Once unable to be separated from his garden games and toys, he had begun to spend hours by himself in his room, curled up and listless, rarely reacting to Charlotte's attempts to lift his spirits. Known for lighting up spaces, the child was fading out of confusion rather than protest. Even though she was recovering, Catherine was unable to overlook her youngest child's silent crisis. Those closest to the family talked about whispered chats in the corridor and restless nights. Attempting to balance both public expectations and personal tragedies, William and Catherine now had to deal with the horrifying thought that, in protecting their kids from the outside world, they had failed to notice the silent wounds that were developing. A gentle, discreet suggestion of therapy was made, but it was resisted. What would be written in the headlines? How long until rumors turned the facts into a scandal? It was unimaginable that tabloids would examine their 7-year-old's emotional well-being. However, it no longer seemed like a choice to do nothing. The increasing gap between private truth and public impression made the situation even more agonizing. The world continued to see staged family appearances and happy royal photographs. But something else was happening behind the palace walls. One of vulnerability of a family struggling in the midst of chaos to keep their kids whole. It served as a reminder that vulnerability does not discriminate, even in monarchy. Lineage does not mitigate loss, and titles do not protect the heart. A decision that would permanently alter Louis was taken in secret while the Wales household battled these personal storms. Up until Louis failed to show up for school, it was a typical weekday. Classmates were perplexed, teachers were informed, and then confirmation arrived. Lamarck was withdrawing Prince Louis. No justification or return date was provided. However, insiders were aware that something had gone wrong and that the royal family had just taken its most extreme action in a long time. This choice has been smoldering for weeks behind closed doors. Despite their greatest efforts to maintain stability and a normal existence, William and Catherine had witnessed their son fall apart. However, it was insufficient. Internal sources claim that a seemingly innocuous remark made during a class exercise served as the tipping point, since it sliced right through Louis's delicate emotional exterior. According to reports, a classmate inquired, "Is your mom still sick?" And even though Louis was genuinely curious, the question made him furious. His eyes were filled with perplexity and anxiety as he shut down entirely, refusing to communicate. He refused to eat when he got home that night. He refused to laugh, and by morning he was refusing to return. The royal parents and their closest advisors then had a discreet but crucial meeting. It was obvious that Louis couldn't carry on in this setting. The decision was made to remove him right away without providing prepared explanations or media briefings, not while the wounds were still so fresh. After being informed, Lamarck refrained from publicly speaking out of respect. Silence, however, was unable to halt the conjecture. His absence from royal engagements, school functions, and even the recent family charity appearance was reported by journalists. There were whispers. Did the young prince have a problem? Had he suffered more than anyone realized from his mother's illness? The atmosphere inside Adelaide Cottage became more defensive. In order to protect Louise from the pressures he was obviously unprepared for, royal aides recommended interim homeschooling under tight supervision. It was an unusual move that is not often made in royal circles. However, William and Catherine had no other choice. Their son wasn't acting badly. He was in peril, in terrible pain, and in silence. Perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this entire situation is not the palace statement, the media speculation, or even the sudden withdrawal from school. It is the reminder that behind the titles and royal traditions stands a little boy trying to make sense of fear, illness, and uncertainty. In choosing privacy over public appearance, Prince William and Princess Catherine may have shown a different kind of strength, one rooted not in ceremony, but in protection and love. As the world continues to watch and interpret every silence, one truth remains clear. The future of the monarchy will not only be shaped by duty, but by how it shields its most vulnerable hearts during their darkest moments. Let us know your thoughts below and subscribe for more updates as this deeply personal chapter for the royal family continues to unfold.